So someone suggested I make a video that's basically a bullet point list of all the reasons I think religion is harmful because they're kind of scattered throughout my videos, minus what's going to be the first point. I could not for the life of me find this comment. My internet was struggling. If I do find it, it'll be on the screen, but don't hold me to that. I'm not sure if I'll be able to find it. But let's just get into it. Point one is what anyone who's watched this channel probably expected: belief without proof / faith. If you want a more in-depth explanation of why I think this is harmful, I will link a pretty old, poorly made video I did on it, but or I may actually end up making a new one. But basically, my issue with this, it's a few things, but it's mainly that it's lying. Um, Outside of religion, which, mind you, belief without proof is innate to religion because by definition, religion has supernatural elements. But outside of religion, belief without proof / faith is not seen as a virtue. If someone tells you that they believe aliens came to Earth and abducted them, you're probably going to laugh a little bit because there's no proof of that. Why would they believe that? There's no proof aliens have ever been to Earth. There's no proof that aliens even exist. There's no proof that this happened. And there is proof that it was probably a dream or sleep paralysis. So, of course, you're going to go, oh, well, why would I believe that? I have no reason to believe that. I have no proof of that. And maybe you'll humor them because it's a bit funny, but you're not going to just take that at face value and say, yes, that's true, and that's your truth, and that's what you should stick by. Or flat earthers. Flat earthers obviously have no proof for what they believe, and no one thinks that their belief in that is a virtue. Sure, no one's going to take it super seriously or think it's a big threat because it's just silly, but no one is saying that their faith in a flat earth is a virtuous quality like you do with religious faith. Belief without proof outside of religion is generally not seen as a positive, but because in this context it's connected to religion, people see it as a positive. And a lot of people will comment and be like, well, I believe in religion because of faith. Because of faith. Faith is not a virtue. Faith is intentional lying to yourself. It is allowing yourself to believe something it's a lack of critical thinking skills. It's switching off your critical thinking, switching off the logic in your brain and going, I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need to think about that. Critical thinking can step aside on this issue and come back for the other ones. And we can leave it at that because faith is good enough for me. And I don't think faith is good enough for anything. Two kind of is led into with one, that being wasted time. Now, I will admit this is more of a personal thing that I just think it's disappointing. But if people want to waste their time, ultimately that's up to them. But it is wasting time doing, whether you're a pastor who dedicates your life to Jesus, a nun who's celibate your whole life, or just a casual Christian who maybe goes to church on special occasions, you are wasting time on something that's not true. You are using valuable time. We only live so long that you could be doing, whether it's something like simple, like taking a nap, or becoming an astrophysicist, like depending on how heavily you ingrain yourself in this. Regardless, it is to some degree wasting time on something that has no merit. And again, this is a smaller point. If people want to waste their time, they can waste their time. It's just something I find rather disheartening and disappointing that people do. I wouldn't necessarily argue it's a big reason I'm against religion. It's just like, that's kind of a shame, you know? So number 3 is restriction. This is obviously going to vary between religions and even denominations of Christianity on what things are restricted and what things are not. And they can be very minor things, like Jane's having to strain all the liquids so that they don't have water in them, which is a stupid so that they don't have water in them, so they don't have bugs in them, which is a stupid waste of time and restriction that you have to do every time you drink or eat something. But it is ultimately not a big deal to something as massive as more right-wing parts of Christianity and more fundamentalist Islam not letting you be gay, which is a fundamental part of who someone is. And things in the middle, like no sex before marriage. Some evangelicals won't even let you kiss before marriage. The quiverful movement, not being allowed to use birth control. bans on abortion, things like that, all things that are completely unnecessary because they cause no harm to anyone, what they are banned. And again, of course, this is going to vary between religion, and some religions have more restrictions than others, and some don't have any at all, although that's not very common. But ultimately, most major world religions do have some form of arbitrary restrictions. Now, of course, there are restrictions that are understandable, like don't kill people or whatever, but most major world religions have arbitrary restrictions. And this is something I also point out when people use Pascal's wager. Now, of course, the main argument against Pascal's wager is, well, what if you're wrong about one of the other bajillion other religions? But an argument that I use against Pascal's wager, in addition to that, which if you don't know, Pascal's wager is the argument that a religious person will say, well, if I'm wrong, I don't lose anything. Nothing happens. But if you're wrong, you go to hell and have to suffer forever. So why not believe just in case? And an argument that I make against that is this: you are missing out on things. It's not that you lose nothing. You lose the valuable time in your relatively short life and the ability to do things that you otherwise would be able to do. And I mean, Jimmy Snow makes a much better case for this than I could possibly explain. But the idea of no sex before marriage is actually very harmful. People may get married and realize that they're gay, that they're asexual, that it's not about not meshing with your partner, being inexperienced. People sometimes don't realize that they're asexual until they have sex and don't get anything out of it, or until they're uncomfortable or whatever. Sometimes people who are in suppressive religions against gay people won't realize they're gay until they get married in a straight marriage and realize, I don't want to do this. And then, of course, you can divorce, but a lot of them are also against divorce. And then you're stuck with that. And it prevents, I think, I'm very much, as long as it's something you want to do and not just something you're doing just because, I am very much pro sex before marriage. You can't know what you're comfortable with. Well, you can, but for non-asexual people, a lot of people won't know what they're comfortable with until they have some kind of experience. And of course, if you don't want to have sex before marriage, people should respect that and no one should force you to do it. But I'm more talking about the ideology of no sex before marriage than a personal choice to do it. Because there are atheists or non-Christians who choose to not have sex before marriage, maybe because they see it as sentimental, maybe because they're worried about STDs, whatever. Um, and of course, that's fine. I personally don't think it's super healthy that if you do intend to have sex, that you wait until marriage. Again, assuming you actually intend to at all. But of course, that's a personal choice. But generally, most people do want to have sex before marriage and are not allowed to. And then, of course, there's the issue of abortion bans. Even in places where it's not banned, congregations shaming people for getting an abortion if they find out, or women keeping pregnancies that they don't want. There's things like more extreme Orthodox Jews not being able to do essentially anything on the Sabbath. There's a documentary called Religiousness, where they interview a very strong Orthodox Jew who has all of these contraptions that he's made to technically be able to do things he wouldn't normally be allowed to do on the Sabbath, like a phone that's constantly dialing every number, so he presses it to make it stop dialing a number so that he can call someone, so that it's not technically doing anything, it's stopping something from doing anything. There are so many wide-reaching reasons why people are not allowed to do certain things. And they are all arbitrary. And it's just making you miss out on a lot. This is a really, really big point, which is why I'm spending so much time on it, against religion. It is restrictive for no reason. And again, before I move on, I'd like to point out, yes, there are some good restrictions. Although usually I will say they don't have the best reasoning for them, but I'm glad they're there. But it also kind of innately, at least with major world religions, enforces some kind of arbitrary rules that take away from the fullness of what you could be doing with your life. Number 4 is children/indoctrination. Now, it's no secret that people's religion generally depends on what part of the world they grew up in. Of course, this is not true for everyone. There's converts, but generally, your heritage and where you live is going to determine your religion. Most of America is Christian or Jewish. Um, and most of the Middle East is Muslim, and most of Southeast Asia and India are Hindu or Buddhist or Jainist. It's very, and a lot of people in Japan aren't religious at all, and a lot of people in Norway aren't religious at all. Um, it really just depends on where you were born. And again, of course, people convert, people have family who are immigrants who believe something else. People have family who converted and then teach it to their children. Like it's not a rule, but it's generally true that where you grew up determines your religion. And a part of that is your parents. Um is parents teaching religion to children. And I can't fully blame them for this because most religions, maybe not explicitly teach it to your children, but of course, if you are religious, you're going to be exposing your child to that. And whether or not you intend to indoctrinate them, teaching a child something that has no proof behind it and telling them it's true because I said so, it's true because the pastor or the rabbi or the people at the temple or the whatever, the whoever said so. It's indoctrination. You can indoctrinate with various different things outside of religion too, including politics and shit, but religion is the main source of indoctrination. And I personally, I've said it before and I will say it again, you should not be teaching a religion to your children until they have acquired at least a level of critical thinking skills. Ex Fundy Diaries said that her first memory around 2 or 3 years old is saying the sinner's prayer. People are taking their tiny, tiny little children, toddler age, to church. And of course, I get you can't leave them at home. And, if you need to take your toddler to church just because you can't leave them home alone, that's one thing. But teaching religion to children is not healthy. Once that child has acquired at least a level of critical thinking skills to be able to discern on their own, is this true because there's merit behind it? Or is this true because my parents are saying it's true? Then at that point, I think it's okay. But until then, what you should be saying if your kids ask is, this is what parent or guardian believes, and we'll tell you about it when you're older. Not, oh yeah, we're gonna sing Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna say this is what parent/guardian believes, and we'll talk about it when we're older, because otherwise it is indoctrination. There's no way around that. You can't teach a belief that has no validity and no proof behind it to a small child without it being indoctrination. Um, if people, and I think a problem here is that a lot of people do want to teach it to their children, maybe subconsciously and some intentionally, because if we don't teach religion to children whenever they're tiny and wait until they can critically think about it, there's going to be a lot less religious people. And religion doesn't like that. Um, which leads me in to point 5, critical thinking. Now, I want to say right off the bat, uh, I'm not saying religious people are incapable of critical thinking, and I'm not saying religious people all are incapable of applying critical thinking to their religion. And this also heavily depends on the religion, because, for example, Judaism very heavily encourages critical thinking, doing your own research, doing your own path on it, making sure that you believe it because you believe it, not because someone told you to. And so of course this is not applicable to all religion, but it is prominent within religion as a whole. I just want to point out the exceptions there, particularly Judaism. So this one is a general thing that happens, but is not a rule, the same way that belief without proof is. But religion helps you turn off your critical thinking skills. Um, Not in other areas, and not always, but it is hard to believe something that has no proof whenever you apply critical thinking to it. And that goes back to issue number 1 with faith, is that it tells you don't do critical thinking, don't use logic, don't use science, use faith. And I think that is a really big problem. And that is actually the reason that so many people, including my parents, stop being religious when they go into a STEM field. Based on a research study from 2009, which unfortunately was the most recent one I could find, I will just read it. According to the poll, just over half of the scientists at 51% believe in some form of deity or higher power. Specifically, 33% of scientists say they believe in God, while 18% believe in a universal spirit or higher power. By contrast, 95% of Americans believe in some deity or higher power, according to the survey of the general public conducted by Pew Research Center in July 2006. Specifically, more than 8 in 10 Americans, 83%, say they believe in God, and 12% believe in a universal spirit or higher power. Finally, the poll of scientists found that 4 in 10 scientists, 41%, say they do not believe in God or a higher power, while the poll of public finds say that only 4% of Americans share this view. Now, of course, this is an older study, and those numbers of atheists have gone up dramatically in the last, I'm bad at math, since 2009. But it really shows that less than half of the amount, or around half the amount of the general population in terms of scientists believe in religion, and only a third of them even actually believe in organized religion, and the rest just are deists or generally spiritual. This, of course, correlation does not equal causation, but it shows to a degree that access to critical thinking skills in science education decrease the amount of religion. And while, again, correlation does not equal causation, according to a poll, atheists are the third most college educated group out of all religious groups. No, atheists are not a religion, but it describes it as those who describe their religion as nothing in particular, according to the survey, which, of course, asks the question, well, what about the other 2% or top two? But the thing is, compared, it's like the amount of atheists still being the third most educated group, I think says something, because there are a lot less of us, and we are still at the top of that list. Now, this is not to say that Christians, Muslims, whatever, can't be smart, educated, critical thinkers, whatever. It's to say religion flips that switch and turns it off in that specific area. And that turning that switch back on is going to stop people from being religious. That's why I always, in my anti-theism videos, say I don't advocate for banning, shaming, or restricting religious practice. I advocate for more accessible science education and more accessible critical thinking and debate skills. Because at the end of the day, banning religion is not what's going to get rid of it. Giving people critical thinking skills will, and making sure that they turn those skills on at the right times. Of course, there are lots of religious scholars who are obviously clearly applying critical thinking to what they're saying. For example, William Lane Craig literally has 3 PhDs. So, of course, there's exceptions to the rules where people apply critical thinking to it and still come to that conclusion. But I'm talking about day-to-day religious people. Religion tells you faith is the thing that you need to go by. Not logic, not critical thinking, faith. And again, that comes back to issue 1. This is my last point, just so that this video doesn't get too long, to be quite frank. Afterlife/death. Now, a lot of people say that religion can help people cope with loss, that it can help them cope with death. But what it does is it puts off grieving. The belief that you don't need to be sad, you don't need to grieve because you'll see them in the afterlife is not a healthy one. Sure, it may make you feel better in the moment, but what it's going to do is make you put off that grieving process, put it on pause, and say, I don't need to grieve, I'll see them in the afterlife. And that's unhealthy. There's also the issue of essentially just living your whole life waiting to die so that you can go to the afterlife or be reincarnated or whatever, and basing all your decisions on what's going to happen when you die. If you have good enough karma to be reincarnated or reach enlightenment, be reincarnated as something good. You're going to be reincarnated either way by that logic, but something desirable. Or if you're going to go to heaven and see your loved ones, or if you're going to go to hell and suffer forever. That you're making your choices not based on what's good for you, what's good for the people you care about, but what's going to result in the best afterlife. You are living your life to die. We only live so long, and wasting that time, again, back to wasting time, on just saying, I'm doing this so I don't go to hell, I'm doing this so I don't go to hell, I'm doing this so I go to heaven. It's living your life to die. And yes, it may give some people comfort, but it's false comfort, and it puts off the grieving process, and it results in you making decisions that you may not otherwise make based on what is going to happen when you die. And by saying what will happen, I say what they think will happen, because it probably won't. It is living your life not to the fullest because you think, well, there's another one waiting for me at the end. There's not. You can't live your life just waiting for it to end. They say this is hopeful, but to me it sounds like a depressed person. Like, it doesn't sound healthy to be basing all of your decisions, all of your beliefs, all of your actions on your death. And quite frankly, I think it's sad that people don't realize this is the only chance you get. Use it wisely. They think this isn't the only chance I get, so I need to make sure that the second one is worth it. That's really all. I mean, I have a lot more reasons religion is harmful, but this video is already 20 minutes long, so we're gonna cut it off there. I could keep going, but I'm not gonna do that. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you, because this was really rambly. I hope you all have a great day. Ha det bra.
I stare at the populace in prayer. I look at them talking to